Okay, let's continue the series of videos where we look at WarFrames and give them individual scores based on gameplay mechanics. We're going to be looking at Limbo. Limbo is a very interesting WarFrame who is unique in that he brings an entire mechanic into the game that exists only within himself. So, what am I talking about? We're talking about his rift, which is essentially a plane of existence that only he is really able to access and bring allies into. So, let's have a look at his kit. Limbo's first ability is called Banish, and basically what it does is that it sends enemies into the rift in an AoE. So these two enemies here with these special effects around their feet, that is an indicator that they are very much in the rift. His second ability is called Stasis, and the way the Stasis works is that it basically traps enemies inside stasis. They basically cannot move. This also affects things like enemy rockets. So for example, here is a rocket here that is currently sitting in stasis. It can't move and neither can them. Limbo's third ability is called Rift Surge, and the way that Rift Surge works is that it allows you to apply a surge of energy onto an enemy inside the rift, and then by using that energy you can then trap additional enemies into the rift, so that you don't even have to drop out of the rift to do that kind of thing. And finally, his fourth ability is called Cataclysm, and it's basically a gigantic dome, a pocket energy ball that places an entire area into the rift as well. Limbo also has a passive that you may be seeing on the bottom right hand corner as well, where he gets some energy as long as he is standing in the rift, and he also gets additional energy if he happens to kill someone in the rift. So that is very, very interesting. Limbo is also able to just dash in and out of the rift, so by pressing shift twice, you dash into the rift. You also leave a little portal for allies to jump into the rift without you having to use your banish on them. Alright, let's talk about Limbo's damage output. So in my opinion, I feel like Limbo's damage is more around buffing his weapons. Generally, his abilities themselves don't really do a whole lot of damage, but I somehow vaguely remember someone telling me about a way to use Banish in order to do tons and tons of damage to enemies, but I don't really know much about it. So if you happen to have any idea, it has something to do with Banish and Rift Surge, dropping them in and out of the rift multiple times in order to just completely wreck them, then feel free to leave a comment and I will know more about it. So the way I tend to do damage is through an augment called Rift Torrent. Rift Torrent is a Rift Surge augment where Limbo deals 30% extra damage for each enemy affected by Rift Surge while in the rift. So with my build at 159% power strength, that bonus damage goes up to 47%, and that is per enemy that is attached to the rift. For example, here we have in the brand new Simulacrum 20 corrupted heavy gunners who are very much just chilling in a grid. Fantastic. So if I were to use Cataclysm like so, and these enemies are now inside the rift, if I were to press 3, I am now doing 954% extra damage. So what does that look like with my Scourge? It's pretty fast. And if I were to just use them against unrift torrented enemies, as you can see, it is a huge difference. And that's usually the way it works. So Rift Torrent acts like an additional serration mod. So it's not a multiplier on your overall damage after every single mod. It's just a multiplier on your base damage before you then add other things as well. The other way to do damage with Limbo is to use a low duration nuke build through Cataclysm. So what that looks like is something like this, where we would then activate Cataclysm against all of these enemies. That Cataclysm will then collapse in on itself really early, and that will kill all of these trash mobs. However, it doesn't really affect any higher level enemies, and it certainly won't affect even low level corrupted heavy gunners. It is really just a trash mob room clearing build. So the build that you would be aiming for would be something like this, something where you are going for high strength, high range, low duration, extremely low duration, because that way you have less time to have to worry about that Cataclysm collapsing. But in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be all that useful, so I tend to ignore this kind of playstyle. For those who are wondering, the amount of damage that is done by Cataclysm collapsing on itself is actually 5% of the average health of all the enemies who are caught in that Cataclysm. So because I had a bunch of enemies who happened to be corrupted heavy gunners, that would actually bring that damage up against the butchers. But because I had a bunch of butchers, that would actually lower the amount of damage against those corrupted heavy gunners. So because Limbo's damage seems to be based around weapon damage through the use of Rift Torrent, at least as far as I can tell, I would probably only give his damage score a 5 out of 10. Alright, let's talk about Limbo's survivability, and it's going to be very, very simple. As long as Limbo is inside the rift and there are no enemies inside the rift with them, he is able to survive basically everything because nothing can hurt him outside of the rift. So, as long as that happens, he's safe, which basically means he has 10 out of 10 survivability. Hooray! Awesome. Otherwise, if you want to look at it a little bit more in detail, I guess right off the bat, Limbo has average health, average shields, below average armor. He doesn't have any way of healing himself outside of arcanes, which doesn't really count. And yeah, that's basically it. So if you ignore the rift entirely, then Limbo has, I would probably say, 2 out of 10 survivability, barely any. The only thing I guess that saves him now is shield gating, but otherwise he doesn't have much in the way of survivability. But if you do include the rift, it's going to be a 10 out of 10 survivability score for Limbo. Okay, let's talk about Limbo's support capabilities. And basically right off the bat, the main thing is that Limbo's passive, being the Rift, is a very powerful support ability in that it gives allies energy. So the amount of energy that you get is at a rate of 2 per second, which by comparison is a little under half of the 5 per second that Zenuric's energizing dash would normally give you. But you only have to stay in the rift to get that energy. As far as I can tell though, killing enemies inside the rift doesn't give allies energy, it will only give you the Limbo energy, so that's not going to be a support capability at all. Furthermore, Limbo has a very specific augment called Rift Haven. So Rift Haven is a banish augment, and basically allies who are banished to the rift will have 25% of their maximum health restored. That is 25% of their health after mods such as Vitality or Umbral Vitality. So for example, you could have Titania with 300 health, they would heal 75 health. Or you could go to the complete opposite side, you could have Inaris with a whopping 4,620 health after Vitality, and they would heal a whopping 1,155 health, because that is 25% of their maximum health. With this build though, because we do have extra power strength, that percentage goes from 25 to 39% health. So that is definitely something you could consider doing if you really want to. I don't really see that many people using Rift Haven though, so reasons I guess, but taking this all into account, for Limbo's support score I would give it a 7 out of 10. 4 points given for his Rift being able to give allies energy, albeit at a, I guess, slow-ish rate, and 3 points for being able to directly heal allies via an augment.
She's vulnerable. Let's wrap this up.
Okay, let's talk about Limbo's crowd control capabilities, and Limbo is basically the king of mobile defense type missions. Any mission that involves a duration-based defensive mechanic is basically completely and utterly trivialized by Limbo, and it's because he has stasis into Cataclysm or Banish, and that basically freezes every single enemy within that room. So stasis being a hard stun affects all enemies. They can't move, they can't attack, they can't do anything. You can choose to kill those enemies if you want, like so that is perfectly fine, and you'll also get some energy from that, so just keep in mind that as well. Or you could just choose to completely ignore these guys and just wait out the defense objective by just chilling. That's all you have to do. So that's really good. So long as stasis is active, you can use Cataclysm, Rift Surge, and Banish to actually further put more enemies into the rift if they happen to fall out of the rift, but typically you're not going to come across that many opportunities to do so. You can also increase the duration of Cataclysm via an augment called Cataclysmic Continuum. It increases the duration by 1 second for each enemy that is killed inside the rift. So when you use an augment like that, not only are you getting energy from killing enemies, you're also getting additional Cataclysm duration out of that. So what does that look like? Well, it basically looks like this. Right now we have 72 seconds of Cataclysm left. If we were to kill this corrupted heavy gunner, 68, 67 goes back up to 68. So when you have a lot of enemies who happen to be trash mobs inside a Cataclysm, you can actually increase that duration really easily. It might not be like dollars to donuts infinite loop type thing here, but you will still get a lot of duration out of it, especially if you're using an AoE weapon like a lens or the Kuva Brahma and you kill multiple enemies at the same time. If you one-shot them, then you could basically get a profit off that Cataclysmic Continuum, if that makes sense. So due to the mass hard stun nature of his crowd control, I would obviously give Limbo's crowd control a score of 10 out of 10.
We are finished here. Move on.
Okay, let's talk about Limbo's kit usability. So generally speaking, I don't find myself using Banish or Rift Surge all that much. Due to the power of Limbo's passive energy, I can just constantly use Cataclysm, use Stasis. When I'm done with that, I just drop the Cataclysm and then go again, use Cataclysm, use Stasis, all that stuff. So I tend to not need to use Banish and Rift Surge all that much, but you could decide to use that kind of combo instead of a Cataclysm combo so that you can get a much more mobile chain of crowd control. That's entirely up to you. Despite that though, all the augments for Limbo's abilities are very, very useful. So that's Rift Haven, that's Rift Torrent, that's Cataclysmic Continuum. They are all very, very strong, and I would definitely recommend using them whenever you can. But otherwise, I would probably give his kit usability a score of 8 out of 10 in the sense that Rift Surge and Banish would only get 1 out of 2 points, whilst his other two abilities will get 2 out of 2 points, and of course his passive, being the ability to get extra energy from the rift, is obviously going to get a 2 out of 2 points. So that's 8 out of 10. So with a damage score of a 5 out of 10, a survivability score of 10 out of 10, a support score of 7 out of 10, and a crowd control score of 10 out of 10, and again a kit usability score of 8 out of 10, that gives Limbo an average of 8 out of 10. If you are new to using Limbo, don't be disheartened. It's going to take some time to acclimate to his totally unique and completely original play style, because you need to figure out the mechanics surrounding him. So don't be disheartened if, for example, you try to shoot an enemy who happens to be outside of the rift while you're inside of the rift, or vice versa. That's just how it rolls. You just kind of have to get used to it and figure him out. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Do you think you'll be using Limbo in the near future? Have you used Limbo before? Do you know any other special way that you could use Limbo? Feel free to leave them in the comments. Otherwise, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more WarFrame content, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.